Hello, everyone, and welcome back. I am so grateful you've joined me today, and I can't wait to dive into something that has the power to change your life. Cruelty is not a simple act, it is a choice, deliberate and calculated, born from fear, envy, or anger. And while it might seem for a fleeting moment to elevate the one who inflicts it, the truth is that cruelty binds them tighter than a chain. The marks they leave on others are mirrored within their own psyche, etched into the fabric of who they are. You see, there is no escaping moral accountability. You might deceive others and perhaps even yourself for a time, but deep down you know the harm you've caused. That knowledge doesn't dissipate, it lingers, growing louder in the quiet moments. It manifests as guilt, as shame, as that sinking feeling in your chest when you dare to reflect. And the more you ignore it, the more insidious it becomes, gnawing away at your peace and your soul. Cruelty isolates. You push people away, not just those you harm, but even those who might have cared for you. Trust erodes. Relationships crumble. And there you are, standing alone, wondering why the world seems so cold, so indifferent. It's not the world, it's the walls you've built with your own actions. And think about your legacy. What will people say about you when you're gone? Will they remember the moments you were kind? Or will the shadow of your cruelty overshadow everything else? Your actions today ripple into eternity. They determine whether you'll be remembered with love or bitterness. But here's the paradox: life is relentless in its fairness. What you put into the world has a way of finding its way back to you. The pain you inflict will eventually find its mark, not always in the way you expect, but it comes. This isn't some abstract karmic principle, it's human nature, society, and even the inner workings of your mind conspiring to hold you accountable. What a tragedy it is to waste the potential for good within you. Every act of cruelty is a missed opportunity to rise above your baser instincts, to be better, to build instead of destroy. And yet, even now, even after all the wrongs you've committed, redemption is possible. Confront the truth. Acknowledge the harm you've done. Apologize not because it absolves you of guilt, but because it's the first step toward becoming someone better. The haunting of cruelty is not just a punishment, it's a call to action. It's the universe screaming at you to change, to grow, to make amends. Don't let it be your prison. Let it be your teacher. Moral accountability is an inescapable reality of the human experience. Every action, every choice carries a weight, and cruelty is no exception. When someone commits an act of cruelty, it isn't simply erased once the moment has passed. It leaves an imprint, not only on the person who suffers, but also on the one who inflicts the harm. This imprint isn't superficial, it goes deep, touching the core of who they are and shaping how they perceive themselves. At the heart of this lies the conscience, an innate moral compass that most people cannot ignore indefinitely. Even if cruelty is rationalized or justified in the heat of the moment, the mind has a way of revisiting those actions in quieter times. These moments of reflection often come unbidden during solitude, in dreams, or in fleeting flashes of memory, and they bring with them a sense of discomfort, unease, or even guilt. This is the mind's way of grappling with the dissonance between one's actions and the inherent understanding of right and wrong. This accountability is not imposed externally, it's an internal reckoning. It doesn't require the judgment of others or societal condemnation to take root. It's the nagging feeling that something was amiss, the recognition that harm was done when it could have been avoided. Over time, this inner awareness can grow into a profound source of distress, manifesting as self-doubt, anxiety, or even self-loathing. The person begins to carry the weight of their actions as if they are walking with a shadow that grows heavier with each step. Even those who seem to suppress this awareness, burying it under layers of denial or distraction, are not free from its effects. Suppressed guilt often finds alternative ways to surface, sometimes through anger, resentment, or a sense of disconnection from oneself and others. Or it festers, creating emotional and psychological burdens that are difficult to articulate or resolve. The very act of denying responsibility can become a consuming force, robbing a person of their peace of mind and clarity of purpose. This inescapability of moral accountability underscores a fundamental truth about human nature, that our actions matter, and they leave lasting traces. The cruel individual, even when surrounded by silence or complicity, is ultimately left alone with the reality of their choices. The psychological repercussions of cruelty run deep, often far beyond what the perpetrator might initially recognize. When someone acts with deliberate malice or inflicts harm on another, they create a ripple effect within their own mind, a disturbance that may not immediately reveal itself but inevitably grows over time. These effects are rooted in the inherent conflict between their actions and the natural human inclination toward empathy and connection. Cruelty often gives rise to guilt, a powerful and pervasive emotion that gnaws at the edges of a person's consciousness. Even if they justify their actions in the moment, the weight of having caused unnecessary suffering lingers. Guilt is not merely an abstract concept, it manifests physically and emotionally, contributing to feelings of heaviness, restlessness, and unease. It can become a persistent whisper in their mind, a reminder of what they have done and the damage they have caused. And closely tied to guilt is shame, which goes even deeper, striking at the core of a person's identity. While guilt is about actions I did something wrong, shame is about the self I am wrong. This distinction makes shame particularly corrosive, as it erodes self-worth and fosters a sense of being fundamentally flawed. This internalized negativity can trap a person in cycles of self-criticism and despair, making it difficult for them to move forward or find peace. Acts of cruelty can also lead to increased anxiety and paranoia. When someone harms others, they often project their own capacity for harm onto the world around them, expecting retaliation or mistrust. This mindset can create a state of hypervigilance, where they are constantly on edge, anticipating the consequences of their actions. Their perception of the world becomes skewed, filled with threats and dangers that mirror the harm they themselves have inflicted. Self-destructive behaviors are another common outcome of unresolved cruelty. The internal conflict caused by guilt and shame can lead individuals to engage in actions that undermine their well-being. This might include substance abuse, reckless behavior, or sabotaging relationships as they struggle to cope with the unresolved tension within. These behaviors can become a form of subconscious punishment, a way of trying to atone for their actions without directly confronting them. In many cases, cruelty isolates the perpetrator from meaningful connections. The more they hurt others, the harder it becomes to maintain authentic relationships. This isolation is not merely external, it occurs internally as well, creating a disconnection from their own sense of humanity. Over time, this sense of alienation can deepen into feelings of loneliness and emptiness, compounding their psychological distress. The mind has a way of holding on to unresolved pain, replaying moments of cruelty in an endless loop. Memories of harmful actions resurface, often unexpectedly, disrupting daily life and haunting their thoughts. These intrusive recollections can create a pervasive sense of regret and sorrow, turning the past into an inescapable source of torment. Social isolation is one of the inevitable consequences of cruelty, as it fundamentally damages the trust and bonds that sustain meaningful relationships. When someone acts with malice or harm, they create a barrier between themselves and others, even if this separation is not immediately visible. People naturally withdraw from those who display cruelty, whether out of fear, a loss of respect, or a desire to protect themselves from further harm. The cruel individual often finds themselves alienated from those they once cared about or who cared about them. Acts of cruelty signal a disregard for the well-being of others, and this erodes the foundation of any relationship. Trust, once broken, is difficult to restore, and cruelty shatters trust more profoundly than almost any other behavior. Friends, family members, and colleagues may begin to distance themselves, creating a widening gulf between the person and their community. This isolation is not only external but internal as well. A person who engages in cruelty often becomes disconnected from their own capacity for empathy and compassion, essential elements of human connection. This internal disconnection makes it harder for them to relate to others on a genuine level, even if they desire reconciliation. They may find themselves misunderstood or incapable of fully understanding the perspectives of those they have harmed, further deepening the divide. Over time, this separation creates a sense of loneliness and estrangement. Relationships that once brought joy and support are replaced by a growing awareness of being on the outside looking in. Even in situations where they are surrounded by people, the knowledge of their actions creates an invisible wall, preventing genuine closeness. They may become increasingly guarded, suspicious, or defensive, further alienating themselves from others. The social repercussions of cruelty extend beyond personal relationships. Within a community or workplace, cruelty can tarnish a person's reputation, labeling them as someone to be avoided or mistrusted. People may hesitate to confide in them, collaborate with them, or even engage in casual interactions. This social exclusion reinforces the isolation, creating a feedback loop where their actions drive others away, and the lack of connection exacerbates their sense of separation. In some cases, the isolation is self-imposed. A person who has acted cruelly may withdraw out of guilt or shame, avoiding interactions that might remind them of their actions. They might also anticipate judgment or rejection, choosing solitude over the vulnerability of facing the consequences of their behavior. This retreat, while seemingly protective, only deepens the isolation, cutting them off from opportunities for growth, forgiveness, and redemption. Ultimately, social isolation is both a consequence and a reinforcement of cruelty, leaving the individual increasingly alone in a world that no longer feels welcoming or safe. The connections they severed, intentionally or unintentionally, become glaring absences in their life, amplifying the emotional weight of their actions. Reputation and legacy are deeply intertwined with the way individuals treat others, and acts of cruelty inevitably leave a lasting mark on how a person is perceived and remembered. Reputation is built over time, shaped by patterns of behavior, and cruelty stands out as one of the most glaring and unforgettable traits. When someone acts with malice, it overshadows their virtues, often becoming the defining feature by which they are judged. People are naturally inclined to recall the harm done to them or others, as cruelty leaves a vivid and emotional impression. Acts of kindness, while appreciated, can fade into the background, but cruelty has a way of lingering in the collective memory. A single moment of harm can outweigh years of good deeds, especially when it reveals a disregard for the dignity and well-being of others. This imbalance in perception highlights the profound impact of negative actions on reputation. Cruelty not only tarnishes how others see the individual in the present, but also shapes the stories told about them in the future. A person's legacy is the culmination of how they are remembered after they are gone, and cruelty has a way of etching itself into this narrative. When people speak of someone who caused harm, the stories of their misdeeds often take center stage, eclipsing any positive contributions they may have made. This becomes especially true in close communities, families, or professional circles where the ripple effects of cruelty can spread widely. A damaged reputation has practical consequences as well. In the present, it can lead to lost opportunities, diminished respect, and strained relationships. Trust, once broken, is rarely repaired easily, and people may avoid collaborating with or supporting someone whose actions suggest a lack of integrity or empathy. Over time, this isolation reinforces the perception that the individual is unworthy of inclusion or respect, further cementing their tarnished reputation. The impact of cruelty on legacy extends beyond the individual and affects the people and institutions they are associated with. A family name, a workplace, or a community can bear the stigma of one person's actions, leading to resentment or shame for those connected to them. This broad-reaching effect underscores how deeply cruelty can damage not just the individual, but also the structures and relationships they touch. The reputation and legacy are not entirely within a person's control, but they are undeniably shaped by the choices they make. Cruelty leaves an indelible stain, one that persists long after the moment has passed. While a positive legacy can inspire and uplift, a legacy marked by cruelty becomes a cautionary tale, a reminder of the harm one person can cause through their actions. The reciprocity of suffering is a fundamental truth that underscores the interconnectedness of human actions and their consequences. When someone inflicts pain or harm on others, they set into motion a cycle that often returns to them in unexpected ways. This phenomenon is not mystical or abstract, but rooted in the natural dynamics of human relationships, societal structures, and the human psyche. Cruelty creates ripples, much like a stone cast into a still pond. The immediate impact is obvious as the victim feels the weight of the harm, but the ripples extend outward, affecting others who witness or become aware of the act. These ripples eventually circle back to the one who caused the harm as their actions alter the way others perceive and interact with them. People are less likely to trust, support, or empathize with someone known for cruelty, and this withdrawal fosters a sense of alienation and hostility around the perpetrator. The reciprocity of suffering is also reinforced by the principle of emotional resonance. When a person causes harm, they invite negative emotions into their environment: resentment, anger, fear, or sadness. These emotions, even when not directed openly at the perpetrator, create an atmosphere of tension and conflict. Living within this environment inevitably affects the individual, as they are not immune to the emotional currents they have set in motion. The negativity they cultivate in others often mirrors back to them, shaping their experiences in ways that perpetuate their own discomfort and unease. On a societal level, acts of cruelty contribute to broader systems of justice, both formal and informal. Communities, workplaces, and social networks naturally work to maintain balance and fairness. When someone disrupts this balance through harm, those around them may consciously or unconsciously seek to address the injustice. This can take the form of direct consequences, such as social ostracism, retaliation, or legal repercussions, or subtler forms of rejection, such as diminished opportunities and waning support. The individual may find themselves surrounded by the fallout of their actions, with fewer allies and more adversaries. Internally, the reciprocity of suffering often arises through the workings of the conscience and the mind's need for equilibrium. Acts of cruelty can lead to guilt, shame, and self-loathing as the individual grapples with the awareness of their own capacity for harm. These feelings, left unresolved, can manifest as anxiety, depression, or a persistent sense of unease. The suffering they have caused others becomes internalized, echoing within them as a reminder of the moral transgressions they have committed. Even in instances where a person appears to escape direct consequences, the reciprocity of suffering often finds its way into their life through the loss of peace, fulfillment, and meaningful connection. The harm they have caused creates barriers to happiness and growth as the weight of their actions shapes their choices, relationships, and sense of self. In this way, the cycle of suffering becomes inescapable, a reflection of the interconnected nature of human existence and the unavoidable reality that harm begets harm. Missed potential for growth is one of the most profound consequences of cruelty, as it represents the loss of opportunities for personal transformation, emotional development, and the building of meaningful connections. Every act of cruelty is a moment where a person chooses destruction over creation, regression over progress, and selfishness over empathy. These choices, while often made in moments of anger, fear, or insecurity, carry long-term consequences that stifle the individual's ability to evolve into a better version of themselves. Human growth is deeply tied to the ability to confront challenges with integrity, to learn from mistakes, and to cultivate empathy for others. Acts of cruelty hinder this process by reinforcing negative patterns of behavior. When a person harms others, they close themselves off to the lessons that compassion and understanding could provide. Instead of learning to navigate conflicts constructively, they resort to harmful tactics that not only damage relationships but also stunt their emotional maturity. Cruelty is often born out of unaddressed fears, insecurities, or a desire for control. These underlying issues, left unresolved, keep the individual trapped in a cycle of defensive or aggressive behavior. By choosing cruelty, they miss the chance to confront and overcome these internal struggles. Growth requires vulnerability, the willingness to acknowledge one's flaws and work toward change. Acts of cruelty mask these vulnerabilities, creating a facade of power or detachment while the deeper issues remain untouched. Relationships are among the greatest opportunities for growth, offering insights into oneself and others through shared experiences, conflicts, and mutual care. Cruelty damages these relationships, severing the bonds that foster understanding and support. Each broken connection represents a lost opportunity to learn from the perspectives and emotions of others. The person who acts with malice deprives themselves of the richness that comes from meaningful interactions, isolating themselves from the very experiences that could help them grow. Furthermore, cruelty limits the scope of one's worldview. It narrows the individual's focus to their immediate desires or frustrations, blinding them to the broader consequences of their actions. This short-sightedness prevents them from developing a deeper sense of responsibility or purpose. Growth requires stepping outside oneself, considering the needs and experiences of others, and striving to contribute positively to the world. Acts of cruelty undermine this expansive perspective, keeping the individual confined to a smaller, more self-centered existence. The potential for growth also includes the ability to find meaning and fulfillment in life. By harming others, a person diminishes their own capacity for joy and connection. Cruelty fosters bitterness, resentment, and guilt, emotions that crowd out the space needed for personal contentment and peace. The energy spent justifying or avoiding responsibility for cruel actions could be redirected toward building something meaningful, whether it's stronger relationships, personal achievements, or a sense of inner harmony. Ultimately, acts of cruelty represent a failure to rise to the challenge of becoming more than one's base instincts. They are moments where the individual chooses to stagnate rather than evolve, to harm rather than heal, and to retreat from the hard but rewarding work of growth. Each instance of cruelty is a missed chance to learn, to connect, and to become a more compassionate and capable version of oneself. Redemptive opportunities are a vital aspect of the human experience, offering a path for those who have caused harm to confront their actions, seek forgiveness, and transform themselves. No one is beyond redemption, but the journey requires a willingness to face difficult truths and take meaningful steps toward change. These opportunities are not merely about undoing past harm, but about embracing the possibility of becoming a better person despite one's transgressions. The first step toward redemption lies in self-awareness. Acknowledging one's cruelty and its impact on others is an act of courage, as it requires breaking through the barriers of denial, justification, or self-righteousness. This recognition is not easy. It often brings with it guilt, shame, and regret. However, these emotions, painful as they may be, are necessary catalysts for transformation. They signal the conscience at work and open the door to meaningful introspection. Taking responsibility for harmful actions is the cornerstone of redemption. This means not only admitting wrongdoing internally, but also expressing it outwardly to those who were harmed. A genuine apology is more than words. It conveys a deep understanding of the pain caused and a sincere desire to make amends. This act of humility can begin to rebuild trust and show that the individual is committed to change. Redemption also involves making reparations wherever possible. While some harm cannot be undone, efforts to repair the damage demonstrate accountability and empathy. This might involve acts of service, restitution, or simply being present for those who were hurt, offering support and acknowledgement of their suffering. These acts show a willingness to prioritize the well-being of others over one's own comfort, reinforcing the sincerity of the redemptive effort. True redemption goes beyond individual relationships and extends to the broader context of one's life. It requires a commitment to personal growth and the cultivation of virtues that counteract the tendencies toward cruelty. This might mean developing greater empathy, learning to manage anger or insecurity, or dedicating oneself to acts of kindness and generosity. These ongoing efforts are not about erasing the past, but about building a future that reflects a genuine transformation. Redemptive opportunities often arise in moments of vulnerability. Life has a way of confronting people with the consequences of their actions, whether through strained relationships, personal suffering, or moments of profound reflection. These moments, though painful, provide the clarity needed to reevaluate one's choices and consider a different path. Embracing these opportunities requires a willingness to confront discomfort and a belief in the possibility of change. The process of redemption also holds the potential to inspire others. When someone who has caused harm takes responsibility and works to change, it serves as a powerful example of resilience and integrity. It shows that even in the face of great mistakes, it is possible to turn toward a more positive and meaningful existence. This ripple effect can encourage others to reflect on their own actions and seek their own paths to redemption. Ultimately, redemptive opportunities are an invitation to reconnect with one's humanity. They remind individuals that their past does not have to define their future, that the capacity for good remains within them, and that through effort and sincerity they can heal not only the wounds they have caused, but also the fractures within themselves. The path of cruelty is one that leads to isolation, regret, and a distortion of one's true potential. The consequences are far-reaching, affecting not only those who are harmed, but also the very person who chooses such a path. Yet the opportunity for redemption remains open, not as a mere escape from the past, but as a genuine invitation to rebuild and transform. It is in the courage to face one's wrongs, to embrace responsibility, and to commit to meaningful change that true freedom lies. Every moment of cruelty that once seemed to define a person can be transformed into a turning point, where self-awareness, growth, and compassion emerge as the defining forces of their life. The greatest strength lies not in avoiding mistakes, but in having the resolve to rise from them, knowing that through redemption, one can transcend the darkness of their actions and reclaim their humanity.